This footage captures a historic moment, a day of victory for the Taliban. It's filmed with a cell phone in Qatar on the 31st of May 2014. The men are awaiting passengers to exit these SUVs.
Allahu Akbar!
They have just arrived from Guantanamo, the American detention camp, where they have spent 13 years. They still wear their beige prison uniforms. Among them is Muhammad Nabi Omari.
أكيد لازم كان يوم سعيد التقيت بالإخوة وقابلت الإخوة في نفس اليوم وما شاء الله عزمونا خدمونا كنا مرتاحين لا شك فيه.
With him, 4 other Taliban leaders who have been released in Qatar, forbidden to return to Afghanistan. Of these 5 men, all enemies of the United States, we only have these photos from their time in Guantanamo. Their names are Abdul Haq Wasik, Kairullah Kaikwa, Muhammad Fazl, Nurullah Nuri, and Muhammad Nabi Omari. Americans call them the Taliban Five.
It's the Taliban Five.
Taliban Five. Taliban Five.
أي واحد يريدون يختارون لك يستطيعون. تيقنا والحمد لله وتقوى إيماننا بأن نصر الله تبارك وتعالى يجيء للمؤمنين يجيء للمجاهدين لا شك فيه.
Muhammad Nabi Omari has never before given an interview to Western media. Months of negotiations were necessary for him to accept.
Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. شكرا لكم جزاكم الله خيرا.
Last May, when we conducted this interview, Muhammad Nabi Omari was under house arrest in Qatar. According to the agreement signed with the Americans, he was forbidden to return to Afghanistan. And yet, here he is back in Khost, in his home province. He arrived in Afghanistan on August 17, 2021, 2 days after the fall of the country. With him in this plane, chartered especially by the Emir of Qatar, is the new leader of Afghanistan, Mullah Baradar. In Kandahar, in the south of Afghanistan, the historical stronghold of the movement, the Taliban returned as heroes and paraded around the city in these 4x4s. This footage is reminiscent of their liberation and arrival in Qatar 7 years ago. Today, the Taliban is back. They have just seized the entire country. The West is once again threatened in the face of the Taliban 20 years after 9/11. 3,000 dead, thousands injured, and global shock. All over the world, people remember this day that marked history, including Muhammad Nabi Omari.
كنت في كابل سمعت من طريق المجاء.
I remember we were waiting for the helicopter to take us back to Sarajevo. There was a television with CNN on it in the background, and all of a sudden we saw the footage of the first plane hitting the World Trade Center tower.
My chief of staff came in immediately and he said, General, you need to see this. And by the time I got in there, of course, the second plane had hit as well.
Comprenons à ce moment-là qu'il y a là une attaque terroriste d'une ampleur inégalée, une force symbolique très grande.
Whoever organized the attack was hiding in Afghanistan. Bin Laden and his jihadist group Al-Qaeda found refuge there, protected by the Taliban, meaning students in Arabic. Since 1996, they have imposed a totalitarian regime in Afghanistan. For 5 years, stonings, executions without trial. Their first victims, women. The Taliban refused to hand over bin Laden, so George W. Bush declares war on them.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps.
American firepower is unmatched. Their regime falls in just 3 months. Their top leaders are captured and sent to Guantanamo.
We had been told earlier that we were getting the worst of the worst.
أو مثلا يقول لهم أنا كنت أريد الجهاد ضد الأمريكان.
The victory is crushing for the international coalition led by the United States, an overwhelming victory. But a short-lived one. On the ground, the Taliban refused to give up. Attacks, ambushes, kidnappings. They harassed the coalition. In Iraq, as in Vietnam, the Americans are bogged down. Faced with the resistance of the Taliban, they end up withdrawing their troops. Without the help of the West, the Afghan army is unstoppable. With the departure of the last American troops, the way to Kabul is clear.
Nous avons le déshonneur et la défaite, puisque rien n'empêche le retour des talibans.
Women like this magistrate feel targeted again. On August 15th, the capital fell. Here is the story of the return of the Taliban 20 years after 9/11.
Truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated.
We are in the land of the Taliban Five. To be here, you need the blessing of Muhammad Nabi Omari. Even though the area is still under Afghan government control. Haj Tuti, 58, is Omari's cousin. It's 4 a.m., time for the first prayer of the day in Metakan. The small village is close to the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The two cousins used to come here to pray long before Omari's destiny changed, like that of Afghanistan, to civil war, religious war, and invasion by foreign armies. In 1979, the lives of the two cousins changes forever. War breaks out, the Red Army invades the country. The Soviets come to defend the regime in Kabul at the time of the communist regime. Omari, the young boy, is on the front line against the Soviet army. He becomes a mujahid, a fighter in Arabic.
ولله الحمد أنا كنت شابا في ذلك الزمان كان عمري تقريبا في بداية بدء الجهاد كان عمري 12 سنة. في سنتين 3 سنوات تقريبا أنا جرحت في هذا المعركة الحمد لله 5 مرات.
Like him, millions of Afghans are injured in the fighting. This war also displaces thousands to Pakistan. Some Afghan children join the madrasas, ultra-strict Quranic schools where they advocate religious warfare and the establishment of Sharia law. 10 years later, the Red Army leaves the country defeated. And the madrasa kids, who are now men, return to Afghan soil. They want to impose their new movement. Its name, the Taliban, meaning students in Arabic.
فقامت حركة طالبان بدأت حتى يجيبوا إلى أفغانستان الصلح والسلام ويقيموا في أفغانستان دولة إسلامية كاملة التي كان المجاهدون في زمان الروس بدأوا الجهاد لأجل هذه الدولة.
Leading the Taliban, this man, Mullah Omar, feared by the West. He remains mysterious. This photo, the only one that exists of him, is not even fully authenticated. Mullah Omar trains his troops to fight anyone who opposes him. In particular, the men of Commander Massoud, the Lion of Panjshir. He's the sworn enemy of the Taliban. The country is once again in terror. In 1996, Mullah Omar's men take Kabul, the capital, and become the new leaders of the country.
أيوة أنا كنت موجود معهم في هذه الفترة. والحمد لله قامت الدولة الإسلامية هناك في أفغانستان وأفغانستان صار مستقلا وحرا.
The future Taliban Five are all appointed to important positions. In Kabul, Muhammad Nabi Omari is promoted to Director of the Border Police. Abdul Haq Wasik, Deputy Director of Intelligence. Mohammad Fazil, Chief of Staff of the Taliban Army. Nurullah Nuri, Governor of 2 northern provinces. And Guerrilla Kaikwa is appointed Governor of the Herat region. To maintain its power, the Taliban regime closes the country off. Western cameras are rare. The Taliban Five follow the same rule: no pictures, no photos. An exception is this video that we found. It shows Guerrilla Kaikwa, filmed in 2001, meeting the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. "20 years later, in Kabul, we find a man who governed the country alongside the Taliban Five under the leadership of Mullah Omar.
وزير الداخله ووالد هراته ومحمد نبي عمري دي خست ولايته او غواخ كي طالب العلم دا باك خلق دي او بدوي باندي ملاحظات ني.
Maulvi Kwalamuddin had an important position. He was the minister of eradicating vice and promoting virtue. Under his command, the morality police. They patrolled the streets, searching for forbidden hobbies, like these video cassette tapes, destroyed and hung as warnings.
او د فساد په مقابل کې هم دا خلک و چې راووتل د ملا محمد عمر په څنګ کې زمانه کې په ټول افغانستان کې امنیت دومره اندازې ته قوي و چې په لار کې دشکه $1,000,000 لوېدلي وای نو چا وړای نه سوی هغه به بیرته تا ته رسېدل تر دې نه لوی شهرت ذاتي بل چیرته.
The Taliban accused citizens of moral depravity. They used the fight against corruption as an alibi to impose their law. Their priority target, women. Sharia, The Quranic law is applied to them to the letter. Compulsory wearing of the chador, stoning as punishment for adultery, and torture in public. This video is haunting evidence of the fate of Afghan women. On November 17, 1999, a woman filmed secretly inside Kabul's Ghazi Stadium. This is a public execution. The victim's name is Zamina. She's accused of killing her husband.
Le régime des talibans, très vite, il y a eu des informations de non-respect des droits de l'homme, d'abus sur les femmes notamment.
نحن مقرون بحقوق النساء أعطينا إلى النساء حقوقها وفي المستقبل إن شاء الله إذا جئنا في الحكم نعطي لهم الحقوق. ولكن أظن أن في الحقوق فرق حقوق الإسلام وحقوق الغرب. إذا في ناس يريدون منا حقوق النساء الغربية ما أظن نتفق على هذا الشيء. ولكن كما كلمتك قبل في أشياء مثلا تكون مخالفة مع الإسلام وفي أشياء تكون مخالفة عن التقاليد الأفغانية ولكن العالم جعل حقوق النساء وسيلة للحرب ضدنا.
International institutions are speaking out against the Taliban regime, especially against its senior officials like the Taliban Five. In 1999, the UN condemned the abuses of the Taliban. It denounced human rights violations, war crimes and involvement in opium trafficking. In the eyes of the international community, the Taliban are not only a danger for their people, but also for the rest of the world. As Mullah Omar opened his territory to the fighters of a then unknown jihadist group, which will mark the beginning of 21st century relations. Al-Qaeda decides Afghanistan is the perfect place for its training camps.
إخوة وبعض المسلمين إلى أفغانستان ودخلوا إلى أفغانستان لأن الناس والأشخاص الذين دخلوا إلى أفغانستان في التسعينات هم كانوا يريدون الأمن في أفغانستان لأنهم ما كانوا بالأمن في دولهم وهم يعرفون دولهم مثلا وحكامهم أنهم يشكلون خطر علينا فجاءوا وهاجروا من دولهم إلى أفغانستان.
Recruits are pouring in, including a handful of French. Among them is Murat Ben Shelali. In July 2001, he left the suburbs of Lyon for Afghanistan. His big brother promised him adventure, without telling him of Al-Qaeda.
J'étais un gamin encore, je pense, en tout cas très immature et qui voyait l'occasion simplement de voyager, de sortir du quartier, de vivre une expérience extraordinaire, etc. Et c'est vrai qu'avec le recul, c'est une chose qui est difficilement compréhensible. Dès les premières semaines, je me vois imposer un entraînement militaire et qui va devenir un entraînement terroriste. Donc ça bascule en fait. Donc là, ce que moi j'imaginais naïvement, très naïvement être des vacances, devient en fait un embrigadement terroriste.
Today, Murat Ben Shelali fights against radicalization. But in 2001, he found himself listening to the preaching of a Saudi who will become the enemy of the West, Osama bin Laden.
Il est venu plusieurs fois, il y avait une mosquée dans le camp, donc il venait faire des discours religieux, dans lesquels principalement il désignait les Américains comme étant les chefs des mécréants, et c'était la cible que les musulmans devaient avoir en premier. Et puis il est venu aussi apporter un concept qui était en tout cas de mon point de vue évidemment nouveau, en tout cas c'est la première fois de ma vie que j'entends ça. Il vient prôner ce que lui appelait les attentats suicides, donc des opérations martyrs.
A few days after this speech, Bin Laden follows through with his threats. September 11th, 2001. Nearly 3,000 dead and worldwide shock. In the ashes of the World Trade Center, US President George W. Bush names his enemies: Osama bin Laden, his Al-Qaeda network, and their protectors, the Taliban.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
3 weeks later, bombs rained down on Afghanistan. The US led coalition fights to remove bin Laden and his men. Murad Ben Shalali is in the middle of the chaos.
J'ai réussi à fuir du camp d'entraînement autour du 13 septembre 2001, et c'est là que le piège se referme. Parce que je comprends qu'il y a un lien direct entre l'endroit par lequel je suis passé, Osama Ben Laden, que je viens de croiser, et l'organisation de ces attentats. Et c'est là que je comprends s'il y a bien un endroit où il ne fallait pas se retrouver à ce moment-là, c'était bien celui où j'étais.
Bin Laden, Mullah Omar, high-ranking Taliban officials, and all those who have a link with Al-Qaeda are now wanted men. They will never find Mullah Omar, but they will capture the Taliban Five. They are found and arrested all over the country. This footage from the winter of 2001 shows Mohammed Fazl and Nurullah Nouri surrendering to this group of US allied fighters. They offer to negotiate peace. A few hours later, they are handed over to the Americans. Muhammad Nabi Omari is arrested in Khost, his home region.
أفضل لك أن تروح هناك. إذا ما تروح عندهم ممكن يهاجمونك في بيتك وهكذا. قلت له جيت، رحت هناك تكلمت معهم في المطار في ولاية خوست، فهم مباشرة طلبوا مني الملا محمد عمر رحمه الله، قالوا نريد منك تساعدنا أن نمسك ملا عمر. قالوا نعطيك الأموال، نعطيك هذا وهذا. قلت له خير، إذا أخرج من هنا من عندكم من المطار أشوف ماذا أستطيع. فهم فهموا أن هذا الرجل ما يريد يساعدنا، ربطوا يدي وركبوني في الطيارة.
The Taliban Five are first sent to Bagram, the largest US base in Afghanistan, and then smuggled to an unknown destination.
ركبونا في الطيارة ونزلونا في غوانتنامو. ما نعرف المكان ولا شيء. لما بعد هناك بكرة وبعد البكرة هم أخذونا إلى التحقيق وكلمونا هذه سجن غوانتنامو.
Traverse City, Michigan State, 11,000 kilometers from Afghanistan. This man, enjoying a peaceful retirement, is the architect of the Guantanamo camp, which has become a global symbol of arbitrary power and torture. He was a major general in the Marine Corps.
They had no place to put these captives that they were catching. On the 4th of January, 2002, we received a deployment order to form a joint task force and deploy to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and set up detention facilities, build detention facilities, and have them all ready to go within 96 hours of receiving that deployment order.
Michael Leonard will become the first commander of the Guantanamo camp.
X-Ray was the initial detention facility where the Guantanamo detainees were held. Essentially, these are a series of cells. Each one of them is 3 meters by 3 meters. There is a tin roof overhead to keep the sun and the rain off of them, but it was pretty primitive conditions.
On January 11th, 2002, Michael Leonard is ordered to organize the arrival of the first detainees from Afghanistan.
This photo here is one that was approved for release, so I can use this one. And this is detainees in the first group that were being brought into Camp X-Ray. You can see the two buses. We had 10 detainees on each bus, and this is the first arrival.
On these buses, among the first 20 detainees in Guantanamo history, sit 3 of the Taliban Five.
We had been told earlier that we were getting the worst of the worst. So when they landed, they were met by Marine military police. We had security around the bus.
The so-called worst of the worst are joined a few days later by Mourad Ben Chalali, the young Frenchman. He remembers one of his fellow prisoners, Guerrilla.
C'était un gouverneur à Herat, il me semble. C'était un de mes co-détenus en fait, au camp Delta de Guantanamo. Il semblait avoir de l'importance puisque je voyais défiler devant lui des délégations de militaires américains, etc., qui venaient beaucoup discuter avec lui, avec une espèce de forme d'admiration, de respect, etc. Et c'est vrai que c'était une chose que je voyais, que je ne voyais pas chez d'autres détenus. En fait.
The Taliban Five are high-ranking officials of the regime. But for the Americans, they are enemies without any rights. They are tortured during interrogation.
40 يوم وليلة أنا ما نمت متصلا 3 دقائق إلا إذا نمت دقيقة وجابوا واحد من العساكر ضربوا علي الباب يقول لي يلا اصحى ولا تنام اصحى ولا تنام. هذا 40 يوم أنا لي تجربة في هذا الشيء. ولكن بعض الإخوة ممكن أشهر ما تركوه إلى النوم.
This systematic torture of detainees without trial would remain secret for years. But in 2014, official reports from the US Senate documented the horror of Guantanamo. Detainees were regularly humiliated, psychologically tortured, chained or locked in boxes for many hours. Years of torture without any confessions. The Taliban Five are not cracking, and the Americans have no evidence to link them to Al-Qaeda. The Americans, not knowing what to do with them, put them on this list of 71 detainees who can neither be officially convicted nor released, including Omari and his 4 Taliban brothers.
قالوا لا ما نستطيع نحن نظن أنك تشكل خطر إذا خرجت من هنا. جيد خذني إلى المحكمة. قال هذا بعدين ممكن بعد 10 سنة بعد 20 سنة ولكن الآن ما نستطيع أن نأخذ أي واحد إلى المحكمة لأن ما كان عندهم دلائل ما كان عندهم ثبوتات حتى يأخذونه إلى المحكمة.
While these 5 high-ranking members of the regime are locked up in Guantanamo, their Taliban brothers refuse to surrender their weapons in Afghanistan. They are putting up fierce resistance in the form of guerrilla warfare, harassing foreign troops in the country. In the space of 10 years, the Taliban conquers Afghanistan, province by province. To avoid defeat, the Obama administration sends David Petraeus, the US general back from the Iraqi warfield.
The mission of the military when I took command in Afghanistan was to halt the momentum of the Taliban and then to roll it back in a number of these most serious locations. It was a period where we were trying to halt the momentum of the Taliban. They were on the march. They were gradually taking away from US and coalition and Afghan forces control of various areas of Afghanistan.
David Petraeus will stay in the Afghan powder keg for a year before being named head of the CIA.
Mr. President, thank you very much.
One of his first cases at the CIA, the Taliban have a hostage, an American soldier.
My name is Bo Berko. How old are you? I'm 23 years old.
His captors release a video to prove he's alive. Under duress, he recites a text they wrote for him.
They're treating me better than I've been treated in just as a guest in a regular household in America. I mean, they literally are treating me like a guest here.
Well, we had a pretty good sense of which group was holding him and generally where it was that he was held. We were actually using quite a bit of our very precious intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets of all different types to try to find out where he was. But ultimately, of course, it was a trade that was done to get him back.
Top secret negotiations are a turning point, an unprecedented coming together between the two sides. The talks will take several years. In Guantanamo Bay, the Taliban Five are unaware that their fate is tied to the American hostage.
في ذلك الوقت في تلك الأيام لما كنا هناك حسب ظني ما كانت أشخاصا مهما من هؤلاء الخمسة. والثاني أن الإخوة الذين مسكوا هذا الجندي وهم كانوا يعرفوننا في غوانتنامو في ناس كثيرين من الأفغان ومن العرب ولكن هم كانوا يعرفوننا جزاهم الله خير فهم طلبوا هذا الشيء قالوا نريده حتى هم طلبوا من الأمريكان كثير طلبوا 10 إلى 15.
Since 2012, Doha has become the diplomatic capital of the Taliban. The white flag of what they call the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan flies over the Taliban embassy in Qatar. In Doha, the Afghan government has its official embassy and the Taliban has theirs. It's this diplomatic office that is calling for the release of Taliban Five.
يعني كنا متيقنون بإذن الله سنخرج من هذا المكان يوم من الأيام.
In exchange for the Taliban Five, the Americans secure the release of their hostage, Private Baghdad. He spent 5 years in detention. On May the 31st, 2014, the Taliban show the video of their prisoner's release, worthy of a spy movie. He is picked up by the US Special Forces helicopter. Less than 2 hours later, the same day, the Taliban Five arrive in Doha, directly from Guantanamo. The prisoner exchange is completed. Under the terms of the exchange with the Americans, the Taliban Five are placed under house arrest in Qatar. Here, they are in traditional dress, participating in peace negotiations between the Taliban and the Americans. They even attended diplomatic dinners. Here, a few tables away from the Americans, we recognize Muhammad Nabi Omari and Guerrilla. They are attending the speech of Markus Potzel, Germany's special ambassador for Afghanistan.
And President Dr. Al-Khatani, for their generosity, for the professional organization, and for a really close cooperation for a good cause.
Officially, the Taliban Five are here to negotiate peace, but in reality, they are demanding the release of their prisoners. In the summer of 2020, the last 400 Taliban still held in Afghan government prisons are released. Among them are Taliban fighters who have much blood on their hands.
نحن والأمريكان توافقنا بيننا على هذا الشيء. فالآن طلب صراحة إطلاق المعتقلين ومساجين هذا من حقوقنا. بعض الإخوة الذين اتهموا بالقتل مثلا بالنسبة إلى أن يجيء الصلح والأمن والسلام في أفغانستان أظن هذا قضية أصغر بالنسبة إلى مجيء الصلح والسلام. فينبغي لكل عاقل ولكل معتبر أن يحول الوجه وأن يترك هذه القضية الشخصية بسيطة مثلا أو قضية أخرى بسيطة، لأن الصلح والسلام هذا مهم وأهم إلى أفغانستان.
Even if they have managed to negotiate peace in Doha, the Taliban have never stopped waging war or bragging about their manpower in high-profile propaganda videos. This footage was filmed less than 2 months ago, last June. Yet, these are already images of the past. We follow this Afghan army unit. We're in the province of Jalalabad, in the southeast of Afghanistan, only 200 kilometers from Kabul, the capital. The country is not yet completely in the hands of the Taliban. The regular Afghan army is trying to delay their progress. At the top of the hill, the soldiers' outpost. The man who leads them is only 28 years old. His name is Habib-ur-Rahman Nazand. He leads 80 men.
Assalamu alaikum.
They don't all have helmets, and the few they have are old.
بس ان شاء الله دا زمون وطن دی او که مخکې خارجانو مونږ یې ساتله او که اوس خارجانو ځي مونږ یې ساتو ان شاء الله څه مشکل به نه وي. هیڅ مشکل نشته بیخي نو پرابلم. I say it is a dangerous area. No hand sitting. Yes. No. Sitting here, sitting. دغه اول داس خو د مخالفینو له لوري وشو چې د ځنګل نه وشو او بیا د هغې مقابل کې موږ خپل ډزې وکړې. بس دی.
For almost 20 years, this base was run by the US military. In July 2020, the soldiers handed it over to the Afghan army. Habib and his men are alone, surrounded by the enemy.
بس دغه چې د خپل سپینغر ولسوالۍ د مخامخ سپینغر دی بیا همدغه چې تاو شه اخواته تختو دي تختونه چې همدغه چې تاو شه د دې غر نه اخوا ګودره ده ګودرې نه اخواته نوراچین ولسوالۍ ته همدغه ساحې دي ټول.
Like all his men, he is morally and physically exhausted. The whole unit is demoralized by the strength of the Taliban. A lack of human and material resources, a feeling of abandonment. The defeat of the Afghan army was announced. For those who have committed their armies against them, the Taliban have pretended to want to negotiate peace in order to continue the war.
Taliban haven't even returned to the negotiating table as of mid-May, Why should they return? They're getting what they wanted. They wanted their detainees out of prison, and they want us gone and the coalition gone.
خروج القوات الأجنبية أهم شيء هذا. إذا خرجت القوات الأجنبية وانتهى الإشغال في أفغانستان بإذن الله سيجيء الأمن والأمان والصلح والسلام في الأسابيع أو في الأشهر بدون شك.
Jusqu'à présent, il n'y a pas de respect de la part des talibans de quelque engagement que ce soit. Il y avait des conditions imposées d'avoir un désarmement des talibans. Or, ça n'a jamais été le cas. La preuve, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, les talibans reviennent alors même que l'objectif était qu'ils soient écartés.
I just fear that we will, a year or two or three from now, look back and wonder if we should not have kept 3,500 troops on the ground forever. And you've seen attacks on the, if you will, the intelligentsia, some of the most important elements of society, particularly those that are a bit more secular, the key business people, key government figures.
In Kabul, Afghan men and women who have spent the last 20 years advancing their country live in fear. This woman driving through the center of the capital has good reason to feel targeted. Rahima Rizai is a judge, a government official.
این خب طبعا یک کشور جنگ زده است، حراس و ترس همگی دارن. یعنی ما همیشه با دریور گوشت میکنیم که متوجه موتر باشن، از شیشای عقب متوجه باشن که به نام اسفندی، به نام گدایگر میاین مینای چسبکی را نصب میکنن. نه تنها ما بلکه تمام کارمندان دولتی، علل خصوص قضات که سر قضات قیمت گذاشتن و گفتن که هر کی قضات به شهادت برسن یک انعامی دارن. تمام کارمندان دولتی شما از رسانه ها میشنوید که یکی دو هر روز اینا ترور میشن.
Since the end of 2020, a wave of assassinations has been targeting prominent members of Afghan society. In January, Qadria Yassini and Zakia Hirawi, two judges, were assassinated in the middle of the street. No one took responsibility for the attacks.
طبعا طالبان خب واضحه است که قبلا هم اینا جنایت کردن، کلا طالبان در پشت قضیه بودن. و ما یه راز خود داریم که مبادا روز نوبت ما هم برسه.
Judge Reza is constantly escorted by armed men. She's one of 200 women judges in Afghanistan, a family court judge. Today, she's interviewing this woman who wants a divorce. Her husband married a second woman without telling her, and he refuses to support her.
دوباره مطالعه میکنه قضیه را آماده.
آچکنی باز اولادایت از پیش میگیرن.
اولادایت میگیرن.
با اون خاطر من نمیخوایم.
خب سراماس و چی نام داشت دختر؟ یادی جان شما میستاد باشین؟ خانم میتونه مطالبه تفریق کنه، اما ماده قانون محتویات ماده قانون شما تکمیل کردین. بنابراین ما همون فیصله محکمه ابتدایی را تفریق شده بودین تایید کردیم و اینجا هم تفریق شده این الا محکمه تمیز. سارمال صاحب دیگه صلاحیت داره که قناعت کنه یا عدم قناعتشان ابراز کنن، مختار از خودشان. خب جلسه امروزتان ختم شد. چرا چشمای تشک آمد؟ متاثر شدی؟
اگه اجازه بدید به دیسپوزیشن باشی.
چی کنی؟
به دیسپوزیشن باشی.
نه خواهش میکنم. از ما وظیفه ماست در خدمت مردم هستیم. همین که آزاد شدی احساس آرامش میکنی اونو برای ما همه چیزه. گریه نکو مادر قوی باش، برسان اولادایت برسان. تشکر از شما. زنده باشه. بیرون مصاحبه میکنن امره.
With the return of the Taliban, will this woman be allowed to divorce? In the Taliban's Afghanistan, will Rahima Riza be able to practice her profession as a judge? Or would the capital see the return of Islamic courts as 20 years ago? This atmosphere of war throughout the country is also terrorizing ethnic and religious minorities. We are in the Hazara district of Kabul. The Hazara are a Shiite minority persecuted for decades, especially by the Taliban. The Husseini family has just lost its youngest daughter Arefa, 13 years old, to a bomb attack.
اون بگو تا 11 بجه شب کلی راحت استراحت شد و میگفتم بار خوشم میگفت که ما در سبای امتحان دارم هم یک بگو پیش یک سبای شد ساعت 4 بجه شهید شد اون بگو از کلی فامیل خانه خواب بود و دختر خواب نکرد میگفت که ما چیز سبای امتحان دارم.
It was the girls' school that was targeted. Sabira, Arefa's sister, was also there.
اما اولیش که شده بود ما داخل سین بودیم همون در کلاگی مستاد بودیم که بریم باز کلاگی ما اولی شد دروازه را بسته کردیم کلاگی ما ششتیم باز دومی از یک شد کلاگی ما دیگه از روسی از دروازه فرار کردیم باز سومیش امید که فرار کردیم که بریم دروازه مکتب هم میدویدیم زیاد چی شده بودیم نفهمیدیم که کدام طرف انتحاری شده اون طرف باز وقتی که دروازه مکتب میدویدیم که اون طرف بریم که سومی شد داخل سومی شد که باز وقتتون بالا.
The triple explosion killed 85 people. The vast majority of the girls were between 12 and 15 years old. This attack targets girls' education. Who committed this massacre? In May 2021, the Afghan president was still Ashraf Ghani, and for him, there's no doubt that it was the Taliban.
اسلامی جمهوریت ژمنتیا تازه کوم طالبان باید پوشی چې د ګریل لارې خپل شوم اهدافو ته نشي رسیدلی او که چیرې زموږ د بېګناه خلکو له وژلو لاس وانخلي.
حركة الطالبان أصدر البيان وأدان هذا الهجوم وسماه الهجوم الوحشي حيواني ليس إنساني. هذا ليس من عمل المسلمين حتى ليس من عمل الإنسان هذا العمل الهجوم ولكن حكومة كابل مع ذلك تصر أن الطالبان فعلوا هذا الشيء.
Some amateur videos document events from 20 years ago, far from what's said in official speeches. Here we see a group of Afghan army soldiers surrendering, hands raised, to a group of Taliban. They are shot without any form of trial, a war crime. Muhammad Nabi Omari and the Taliban Five, whose time in Guantanamo allowed them to rise in the Taliban ranks, will undoubtedly play a key role in the Afghanistan of tomorrow.
إذا إن شاء الله خرجت قوات أجنبية فنحن وأنتم كلنا نزور أفغانستان إن شاء الله نروح هناك. تجيء دولة إسلامية جديدة يكون أمن وسلام وصلح.
Since 2001, the war in Afghanistan has killed over 100,000 Afghans. The Americans have lost 2,400 soldiers, the French 90. The United States alone has spent over $2,000 billion on this conflict. And for what? 20 years after 9/11 and the fall of their regime, the Taliban have won on all counts.
أكيد لا شك فيه. داعش يخالفنا في العقيدة، يخالفنا في الأخلاق، يخالفنا في الطبائع، يخالفنا في كل التقاليد. داعش ليس له مكان في أفغانستان إلا اليوم الذي نكون أحياء بإذن الله.
August 16th, 2021. Kabul airport, scenes of immense symbolic power which already belong in history books. Hundreds of Afghans tried to board an American plane. A few hours earlier, the Taliban took the capital. In one day, all the national institutions fall. The Ministry of Education, one of the police headquarters, and the police academy are all guarded by men proud of their victory and delighted to triumph before our camera. In the streets of Kabul, they are parading around in pickup trucks looted from the Afghan army. And even in police SUVs that they have found. These young men dressed in traditional clothes are all armed. At the same time, the highest-ranking Taliban officials, still in Qatar, are filming the televised takeover of the presidential palace that will be broadcast around the world. Their men proudly pose in the office of President Ghani, who has already fled the country. Many locals flock to foreign embassies. In Kabul's diplomatic quarter, French and Afghan nationals are taking refuge in the French embassy. Our team, Sonia Ghezali and Shahzaib Wala, is among them. They managed to film this footage from inside the embassy. Men, women and children registered to be evacuated to France. Before leaving Kabul, we decide to contact Habib, the young soldier, head of the outpost, whom we had filmed a few weeks earlier while he was being shot at by the Taliban.
حبیب من سونیا هستم خبرنگار فرانسوی تشکر خوب هستم شما خوب هستین
We also called Judge Rahima Reza. A few weeks earlier, she was still working at the Kabul court.
سلام رحیمه سونیا هستم میشنوین؟
سلام علیکم خوب هستین؟ بله ما در خانه هستیم در خانه هستیم احساس خطر میکنیم چون تفاوضات افساری های پشت داده بودن ما دیگه بیرون برآمدن نتونستیم ما در خانه هستیم چی شد بر ما که هرچی عاجل باید محکمه رو تخلیه کنیم که جانتان در خطر است ما آمدیم و هنوز اونا داخل کابل نشده بودن که ساعتهای دیگر بود ساعتهای 3-4 دیگر بود اونا داخل کابل شدن حالا زندگی برای ما زیاد خطرناک شده فقط ما مثل یک جای پنهان هستیم دیگه حالا زندگی رو خود شما نیفهمید که شرایط چی آمده
Our team is going to be stuck for 3 days at the French embassy before being taken to Kabul airport at night. On board the bus, passengers are terrified. We film discreetly and hide their faces. Just after leaving the embassy, the bus stops. A mother and her daughter did not manage to get on board, but the other passengers are afraid to open the doors. A few meters away, they saw the Taliban outside.
No, please, don't cry. Don't shout like this. Calm down. Please.
The Taliban end up firing warning shots. The two women manage to get on. The bus leaves. The journey is very tense. After many checkpoints, the passengers are finally at the entrance of the airport. They find themselves under the protection of American and French special forces. The next morning, we managed to get on a plane to Paris. Is Afghanistan really destined to revert to how it was 20 years ago? To fall back under the rule of the Taliban? Only a few days after the fall of Kabul, an incredible scene in the middle of the capital. The black, red and green flags of the country are rolled out in defiance of the Taliban, who imposed their white flag. This footage was filmed on Thursday, the 19th of August, by Jordan Byron, a journalist and member of our team. These men and women are shouting Zindabad, long live Afghanistan. In the heart of Kabul, they are protesting against the surrender of their army and their government and the return of the Taliban. Suddenly, the Taliban surround the convoy. Between determined demonstrators and armed Taliban, the face-off is tense, dangerous. This man points his gun at this young demonstrator. Another one slaps him. This other Taliban is threatening, Kalashnikov in hand. Another one holds him back at the very last moment. In Kabul, as well as in other cities throughout the country, the first signs of protest are emerging. 20 years after 9/11, a part of the young Afghan generation dares to say no. No to a totalitarian regime. No to a system that refuses their freedom and fails to respect women's rights. What kind of future will Afghanistan have? A country at war for over 40 years.